This is a story of how art saved my life on my road to being a professional artist so that it can help you too. Do you ever really wonder what could I have done differently back then? Do you ever wonder what do I wish I did more of? Well, I'm gonna pack all of that today because I think you're gonna find this very relatable. Welcome to Art Mentor. My name is Sean, and being an artist is tough enough, isn't it? And that's why I want to let you know, friend, that you're not alone in what you're going through. So I want to unpack all of the critical understandings that I've come to on my journey to being a professional artist. And maybe too, you'll understand why art can help save your life. So my journey in art actually started by me being a very confused and alone child. You see, I grew up as a child of divorce, and that's not that uncommon, especially in the US. And that really impacted me, that affected me. And what affected me even more was the fact that my parents used to manipulate me against each other. And I think this is a really toxic trait that I've heard of from a lot of people too, and tell me if this is you from people that grow up in this type of situation. But I'm gonna tell you, one of the best things that ever happened in my life was around the time that I was 5, which was that I just loved to draw. And that is when I really developed my penchant. Like, I can look back on my life and say, that's when I did it. And I learned this really critical thing about art and why it's so important to you is that it helps you make sense of nonsense. When you're growing up, when you're a really small child, like my parents split when I was 6 months old, so I was just a baby. And growing up with that, it just doesn't make sense. You don't understand the resentment towards each other, or you don't understand what's going on in your life. And I just want to ask you too, like, how can art help you understand and make sense of things when things don't make sense? Because there's so many non-traveled paths that we go through in life, isn't there? And being involved in art really helped me explore some really nonsensical things that just did not compute with me at the time. And I wonder with you too, is this something that you're doing it for too? But here's a really crazy thing too, is that now that I'm an adult and I look back on that, I also pick it up when I see it in other people. Like when I work with people in my mentorship, I always notice, hey, that connection, hey, that's kind of like that thing that you told me about, or hey, that's kind of like that personal struggle. Hey, can you do more of that with your artwork? Because it can really help you explore and explain things that just didn't make sense. And I wish I did that more as a kid, and I wish I could have gone back and told myself, this is going to help you. Here's something else that I didn't understand at the time, but it was really foundational. So if we fast forward some years, now I'm in middle school, and I started to notice this trend that I think is still ever prevalent to this very day. As I went through all my grade school experiences, everybody loved to draw. And whenever you see elementary school kids, they're so excited to go to art class, right? But by the time you hit middle school, y'all, there's this weird phenomena that happens. And I'm gonna explain it because I don't think anyone else does very well, which is that there is a big art drop-off. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed that by the time y'all hit middle school, that there is a significant reduction in the amount of people that are still pursuing art, the amount of people that think that they're not good enough, that think that they suck, that think that there's absolutely nothing that they can do with it, that they think that no matter what happens, that they will never be decent at art, even much less great, okay? And this starts to stem into what I think is probably one of my greatest understandings and my greatest philosophies nowadays, which is that I think people start to develop a talent complex. And if you ask me why I think this happens, it's really easy because I experienced it myself. Because around this time, this is when your family is gonna start to get in your ear big time. This is when you start to hear things about jobs and careers and what's safe and what's stupid and what's smart and what's the most lucrative thing that you can do. And if this has been your experience too, let me know about it down below, because I think we all hit this one pretty hard, don't we, friend? But I started to get a lot of this from my family. I started to get pushed into doing like businessy things, and I started to get pushed into going into here and over there. And y'all, I didn't want to do that. Like, I really just wanted to draw, and that was really, really, really hard for me. And I think that one of the hardest things for people to do is just to defy and overcome what other people expect of them. And I would notice myself going through highs and lows in my art making, where I would make a lot and then I would make nothing, and I would make a lot and I would make nothing. And why is that? Because I would have to deal with this overwhelming negativity surrounding my current effort. And that's really messed up that we do that to kids, isn't it? But it happens all the time to artists. And when I look back on that nowadays, I just want to say, like, hey man, it's okay. Like, you don't have to listen to other people, because at the end of the day, y'all, when you're a kid, you only have to live with somebody else, guaranteed, for at least like 18 years. But you got to live the other 80 years by yourself and with those decisions. And I wish that I could have gone back and said, it's okay, you don't have to listen to those people. But that is a time in my life though when I'm really grateful that I had that experience, because now I can definitely combat people who have those same types of reservations because I understand where they're coming from. And I don't look back on that and hate the people that told me that. I see that they were just looking out for me, but they just didn't know how to do it because most people are not equipped to. And that's just the honest truth. And what's really, really, really hard about this is staying true to your interests as you grow up, because most people, they're all too quick to abandon it, aren't they? Moving forward some, now I'm gonna tell you why bullying was the best thing that ever happened to me, and especially my art, which sounds weird, but let me explain. This was a really rough time for me because my mother was in and out of hospitalizations all the time because mental illness does run in my family, and it was really tough because I was literally being bounced around to different houses for a good 3 years of my life. Like, I would be lucky to have a full 2 weeks in my home with my mother without being bounced around to a friend or another family member's house while she was in and out. And at that same time too, I was being bullied at school. But this is also when I'm really grateful that I had my art, because art became sort of my trauma center. And I think that this is one of the greatest coping mechanisms that you can develop as a child or as an adult or heck, any point in your life. You can use art to sit there and just let that be your impregnable fortress. This can be just the impenetrable part of your soul that nobody can go into. Because when I was dealing with rough things, guess what I was doing? I was just drawing and I was just making, I was creating. And what that did was it allowed me a positive outlet, because what do most people do in this circumstance? They get into drugs, they get into bad friends, they get into bad behaviors, and all of that, it doesn't serve you long term. Now, through this time though, this was really hard for me. But what really kept me going was I developed this concept. So it's at this point that I started to realize that practice doesn't really help artists, and instead there's something else that you should do. The way I developed this concept is real simple. It's just because I used to always just do things that I loved. I never really worried about how I had to be the best or how I had to employ myself or how I had to, when I was young, like I never really thought about how I would be a professional artist. Like I literally just existed thinking, yes, I'm gonna do great things with this, and I don't really know how. So how did I do that? Was I literally just continued to make things that I loved to do. When I was really young, I used to draw Ninja Turtles. And then as I grew up, I would draw like my favorite anime characters. And then I came to this simple realization. I just need to do projects. And I think that a major critical misunderstanding of artists is that they think that somehow doing loads and loads of practices is gonna make them better. And the problem with this though, is that you're gonna start to develop this philosophy that I developed at that point too, which was that practice equals work and projects equal fun. So why do you feel that you have to draw 1,000 boxes in a month versus you can just actually bang out 1 or 2 portfolio pieces or things that you just really love to do? Things that I loved to do when I was a kid. I used to always love to draw Ninja Turtles when I was really young. I used to always love to draw like my own personal manga. I used to love to make my own IPs. I like to even just make artwork of like me and my friends in different styles. I used to love to make fan art. And that's literally how I developed a lot of the skills that I currently have, is because I never really would think about how do I have to be the best artist? No, friend. Instead, I encourage you to think like this too. Just think about what's gonna be the most fun for me to do and how can I challenge myself just a little bit in every single one of them? Because I promise you this, if you are fully engaged and you're fully focused and you're fully loving what you're doing while you're doing it, you're going to get a lot farther than people that are only practicing, where they're just scratching the surface of what they could do. Instead, you're going to be giving yourself full pieces that will actually fulfill you. And if you also have this type of philosophy and this type of mindset like I'm talking about, then please consider liking and subscribing to my channel down below, just so that you get more content like this to help you along your journey, friend, because I know you're gonna make it. Now I'm gonna tell you why my best teacher in my entire life was actually my lowest point in my life. You see, by the time I got to high school, y'all, that was a really dark time for me. I was really fat and I was continuing to be bullied, and it wasn't cool and it wasn't fun. And the reason why I got that way was because I couldn't always deal with what was happening with me. So I turned to food, and I had a really nasty food addiction. And I'd say part of that is also just because of a culture of food from being part of a big Italian family. And then aside from that too, I was also really struggling with the fact that, you know, I'd never had a relationship with anybody. I'd never dated. I've generally been alone. I've been dealing with all this stuff at home, and my art was definitely my safe place. But then I hit a really critical wall. I started to look at my life and I gave myself a full evaluation and I saw everything that I didn't have. And that then led me to this understanding was that I needed to actively pursue and take charge of where I was and where I needed to go. What that then did is it empowered me to start to take a look at where am I currently and where do I want to go in my life? How do I want the next 16 years of my life to go? I started to question myself. I started to take a look at everything. And then this is also when I started to get super serious about art because I was never the best in high school. And I'm going to say it was never the best in art, period, at any point in my life. But being more involved in art, I learned, also gave me the confidence to pursue and to make some big changes in my life. So basically, over a summer, I literally dropped 70 pounds. That was a really big change for me. I also started to talk to girls more and more. And I realized this, that the more that I started to evolve my art, the more I started to evolve myself at the same time. And being more bold in my artwork and chasing the things that I wanted to do and growing my skills the way I wanted to do it also enabled me to really shape the foundation of my entire life and the entire structure of it. And through this, I realized that the number one thing that you always have to do is you have to create a compelling future. And are you currently struggling with this? Because I want to ask you, how can you start to use a compelling future as a baseline for you to start to work towards everything that you want and wish for? Now, moving into my college years, I started to learn, why do people resent atypical lifestyles and why do they resent people that try harder than them? And the reason why I came to this is because at the time I was working just your standard minimum wage jobs, and I worked at home improvement stores and I also worked at supermarkets. And through all of that, y'all, I discovered that people generally have very low expectations of artists, and specifically on what their potential is for it. So have you ever heard people tell you things like, oh, well, you're never gonna go anywhere with that, or you're gonna be working here forever, or you can try to do that, but it's just not gonna amount to anything? Well, here's the thing that I did kind of notice, and I used to get really mad about this until I just realized this, is that they're really just talking to themselves. And one thing that I came to realize is that if I had listened to every single naysayer in my life, then I would be exactly where they are and I would be as miserable as they still are about their current lifestyle. And the reason why this happens, friend, is because people don't like them feeling insecure by being around more ambitious people. And around this time in college, I was also feeling insecure. I was feeling insecure because I was never the best in my class. And I would look at my peers' artworks and that would make me kind of go crazy. And then I would also look at this time, like the internet was a big, huge thing and we had big, huge communities like DeviantArt and ArtStation starting to pop up around this time too. And I would look at those artworks and be like, how am I ever gonna get there? And how am I ever gonna do this? But then I realized this, that I had to embrace being extraordinary. And I also had to embrace doing things that people did not deem to be valuable, or they deemed to be insurmountable, or they deemed to be impossible. And I also found this, and I got encouraged to do this a lot, actually because in the previous summer, I met my wife. And that was a really transformative experience for me. And at the time though, we were just dating, like she had no problem with the fact that I wanted to be an artist, and she had full rock solid belief in me. And the reason why I think that happened was because that was the energy that I was starting to put forth into the world, and you'll start to attract more people based on how your current outlook is. So what that enabled me to do, and thing that I would encourage you to do, friend, is just consider this, that you're going to attract the people into your life that deserve to be there based on what you're putting out in there. And if you can embrace being extraordinary, and you can embrace your efforts, and you can embrace the fact that your efforts are going to amount to something amazing, then they will indefinitely amount to something amazing. Have you ever thought of that? Now, post-graduation, when I started to enter my career being an art educator, I learned from teaching others how that taught me more about myself and about artists in general, and gave me perspectives that nobody talks about like this. So throughout my career, I've always struggled with how do I help students not be dissuaded and not be disinterested and to keep going with the artwork, because I noticed that they were feeling the exact same ways that I felt when I was growing up, and they're getting the same noise and influences in their ears exactly like I was, and some of them even worse. than me. So my number one priority was always, how do I keep them on track? And I started to notice this trend amongst the ones that did continue, which was that I started to notice, curiously, even the ones that I didn't think had a lot of potential, or the ones that I thought at the time were talented, because I still kind of believed in it at that point, I started to notice this, that as they matured and as their outlooks changed and as they were evolving themselves and entering new experiences in their life, their art evolved too. And that was a very curious parallel to me. So I started to realize this, that the number one reason why most artists die off and that they don't ever develop is that because they just keep living the same life, making the same exact choices, and they keep doing the same exact things. Whereas what you need to make sure that you understand is that you cannot dissociate the art from the artist, because you're interconnected. Your art is literally a reflection of your humanity, is what I started to develop. And this is really, really foundational for me, because at the same time, I was starting to notice in myself while I was helping others, and even though I was doing great at my work and everything and helping more and more artists as much as I could, that I was feeling empty inside. And I was not serving myself. And this is around the time that I wish I had made the decision earlier, but being new to digital art, I started to think I should start to get into commissions. And this is a really, really big evolution for me, and something that I wish I had done years earlier, but I did not have the confidence in it because I noticed that there were a lot of flaws in what people were saying about it. It was soon after that I came to realize how fulfillment is always going to make you pay a price for it. Because around this time, I started to notice this mass exodus from everything that I knew and loved. I started to notice that everybody that I went to school with immediately got out of their careers. If it was teaching art like I was, or if they were just in our careers, or they just gave up on that and decided to switch gears and do something different. I also started to notice that the people whom I went to school with, whom I had known, whom were even better than me, or they had more potential than me, or they were more glorified and lionized at my school than I was, they gave up as well. And that was really weird. It was very strange. Now at this time, I was starting to get my foothold into doing commissions. I had gotten a few clients, I started to do some things, and then I realized this, y'all, is that the number one thing that I think more artists need to come to an earlier understanding of is that you're not gonna get any type of a payoff immediately. You're gonna have to delay gratification. And I used to get super down and out, just like so many of you that wanna enter careers, or you wanna work with private clients, or you wanna freelance or anything. You're gonna expect things to happen right away, right? But here's what happened, is that this was the start of literally a decade-long buildup to where I currently am right now. And I'm so thankful that I did certain things the way that I did them, because I was starting to look around and I noticed, what are people doing online and how are they not getting clients, and what are they doing wrong, or what looked really unprofessional? And I noticed nobody was talking about any of that. So then I started to develop certain strategies and do certain things that other people weren't doing. Like, for example, I started to want to get from one genre into another. So what did I do? I took requests, and I would say that that's one of the number one things that more artists should do. And if you want a guide on how you should do this in order to start to bolster your portfolio, so you're not just sitting around going, wow, I want to build my portfolio, but I don't know what to do, let me know about it down below. I'm happy to make that guide for you. But through delaying that gratification and just working with the pure understanding that this is going to pay off for me, I wish I came to that understanding a lot sooner, because artists always struggle with impatience. Being young, middle-aged, or old, we're all handling this, aren't we? Fast forwarding a few more years, I actually want to tell you why I never wanted to make this channel. You see, the entire idea of this channel that you're watching me on right now, it was never my idea. It was actually my students. My students from time to time used to drop this little nugget on me, and they say like, oh, you should make a YouTube channel, or you should make YouTube videos, or you should make tutorials, or you should talk about this kind of stuff. They would give me some type of encouragement, and naturally I would always meet that back with, no, I don't want to do that. So now at this time, I was a father of two, and I was doing well. I was just starting to get some level of momentum with my commissions. And then this big giant brick got dropped onto me, and that brick was called COVID. You remember that one? And y'all, I'm sure that you experienced this too, didn't you? But it restructured everything in my life. It restructured everything about my job. It took a totally different avenue of how I was supposed to teach, and how do you do art from at home, distance learning, right? And this was when I came to this critical understanding, which was that I needed to embrace video, and I needed to be able to teach students from home how to do the things that we do in class when I can't be right there physically next to them. I started to embrace this concept of how am I going to do something that seems so impossible. And if you actually go back enough time in my channel, you're going to notice that like my first 25 to 50 videos, they are all tutorials on drawing and sculpting. Go check them out, by the way. I think they're still pretty good. Just the quality's not as great. But what was also really hard this time is that for the last 4 years, I've been struggling with something that I never told anybody about and I'm about to tell you, which was that I was also working a side gig. And basically what I did was I worked for this company. It was an awful company. It's called VIP Kid. And if you ever worked for them, let me know down below because they suck. And basically what I would do is because I was sole provider with my family and I was just all about just doing whatever I can to try and make my family comfortable. Through doing this, yeah, I brought in some extra scratch, which was good and all, but I also spent 4 years working 7 days a week and nobody knew about it because I was too ashamed to tell people. And then COVID threw a massive wrench into that because right as we were starting to come out of it, the company decided that they would no longer have foreign teachers teaching their children, and that was per Chinese government mandate. So literally within 24 hours, I completely lost that. And I was feeling really down on it, and then I just decided this. Number one, I would double down on commissions, and that was the best thing I ever did in my entire life because that's what brought me so much of what I'm currently able to do and offer. Number two, I also decided that if I'm gonna lose that, I'm gonna pick up something else, and that was YouTube. So thanks so much for you. And if I had not made the choice to go ahead and really double down on both of those, I might have never met you, and you might have never heard some advice from me that I hope has impacted you in some positive way. Another reason why I really appreciate YouTube is that it's gone ahead and it's allowed me to have another accountability system in place because I feel like I want to make more artwork because I want to help more people and I want it to accompany my content. So y'all, this really taught me a really significant thing, which was that oftentimes you need to go with your gut on what you need to do and what passions you need to follow, even if it doesn't make sense, all right? When I first said I wanted to do this, I definitely had people in my life that said that this was not a good idea, and I kept it a secret for a long, long time. There are some people that probably don't even know about it. But if I did not follow this, I would not have been blessed with all of the amazing things that have come out of doing this. So y'all, you need to follow your passion even when it doesn't make sense, even if nobody agrees with you. Why? Just because you feel it in your gut. Just go for it. Now, moving into my present self, I want to tell you why I am super excited at all my prospects right now from everything that I started honestly 15, 20 years ago, and why that's taught me more about myself through helping others. Because you might think to yourself right now, it's too late to start. I don't have enough time. You might be as old as I am and you're like, Sean, there's just no way I could do anything. And you know what? Here's the best thing I can say to that. You might have heard that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but the second best time to do it is right now. So just start it. There's nothing holding you back other than you, friend. And you won't ever be able to realize that potential unless you actually go for it. Because for me, through teaching thousands of students throughout my career, and then also speaking to hundreds of thousands of you that have watched my channel over the last few years, this has been an immensely gratifying experience to be able to try and impact you. And this has also taught me something really important that I think is really gonna help the art community as a whole, is that we need to be more open, y'all. And this is something that if you watch my videos across my channel, I don't really hold anything back. I want you to know everything, and some people might think that that's stupid, but here's my counterpoint to that, is that if we all do better, then we all win more, and it changes the entire landscape and the entire perception around art. And wouldn't that be wonderful? So instead of you guarding all of your little tips, start helping people with it. How can you help other artists? I've done this through a lot of different ways. Like for example, I have my Discord community. You can go ahead and join that down below, totally free for everybody. And then too, I also offer one-on-one mentorships, link down below. See how my art clients through my mentees have been able to just totally transform themselves in such a short period of time. Definitely check that out if you're interested in working with me. And then I would say the most significant thing that has really impacted me through teaching is just through being a father. And me being the father of 2 sons and creating a different type of atmosphere and a different type of environment than what I grew up in that I talked about today. It's really taught me about how it's so important for us to leave our legacies. And I think that YouTube for me is my legacy because I think about it like this, and this sounds kind of morbid, but I'm just being honest with you. If I were to die tomorrow and my sons at their current ages, they might forget what I look like. They might forget what my voice sounds like. I might start to become like a ghostly specter in their life. You know, that guy that used to exist. But this is also sort of my message to them. Every single one of my videos lets them know a little bit more about who I was, or who I am. At least I'm not dead yet, you know? So think about how what you're doing right now is going to impact not just the next hour or the next day or the next month, but years from now. Because your art contains your personal message, and that's something that will never be silenced. Isn't that pretty wonderful? Now, if you're currently looking at what you've been doing so far and you're wondering, is this right? Or is this wrong? I've heard this and I've heard that. What do I do, Sean? Well, let me tell you about the worst things that you could possibly do. I'm talking about the most toxic habits that artists do all the time so that you can stop doing it right now. You can see in this video right here. Go check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me what you thought down below.